Hello, everybody. Welcome back to London's Pretty Cool Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Briggs, and along with my sister Erin, we are going to be talking to you today with another fantastic guest, Junction Climbing Gym owner John Kudelka. He tells us what it's like to be the owner of one of the best climbing gyms in not only the city and not only the province, but likely the country as well. He tells us all about what kind of things are available at the Junction, how you would get started, and really kind of how easy it is to get into what a really cool program it is available there. Turns out there's a lot more involved with climbing than you might realize, and a lot more that might be different than climbing inside compared to climbing outside than you might realize. That, along with a ton else, please enjoy the episode, and we'll see you. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of London's Pretty Cool Podcast. I'm your host, Erin Briggs, and along with my brother, Patrick, we are here today with the owner of Junction Climbing Gym, John Kudelka.
So, John, thank you so much for joining us. You opened the Junction back in 2014. What's it been like having your own climbing, gym here in the city of London?
It is. It's pretty awesome. I started climbing here in London at a gym that existed way out on Clark Road in the 90s, and like the sport, knew it could be. Climbing is kind of like a tribe. It's like a community that you can become part of pretty easily, and the community that's built up around this place over the last 6 years is wildly beyond what I thought it could become. It's just the nicest group of people you could ever want to hang out with. There's some amazing, strong climbers here. There's lots of folks who come to the sport because of, they were not fitting in other places. And it's just been great. We've had such an amazing response from London in terms of supporting us and coming out week after week and just crushing hard in our climbs.
It's funny you say that. I have a couple friends that have done climbing before, and it seems like once you get into it, it is like a cult or something. It's like, okay, you've got to get your gear, and you can't go unless you've got your gear, and okay, and all this and that. It's very it sucks you in really good. Did you feel like it got you in like that when you started?
I think for me, I was not an athletic kid. I didn't fit well into traditional sports. I was reasonably athletic in the sense that I could run and move, but I wasn't as big as other kids, or I wasn't as fast as other kids. And so fitting into team sports, I was always the last kid picked. And I never really cared about watching sports on TV. And climbing tends to attract a lot of those people who don't find a home in traditional sport. And then what climbing has that's kind of unique is that there's sort of this very natural progression because all the climbs are graded by level. And so you can see your progression and how you're getting better measured against a wall versus measured against trying to beat another person like you would in tennis, or whether you would in trying to become the best player on a team or find your position on a team. It's really just about you beating the challenge that's in front of you. And then the gear is just kind of fun and cool. It's just it's people look at it as it being super expensive, but it's actually a pretty cheap sport. Climbing shoes start at $100, which for compared to that's one hockey skate or one hockey glove. Climbing harness is $60, and that's kind of all you need to get started. So it's pretty accessible, and it's pretty appealing to folks who aren't finding a home other places.
Speaking of home, what is the meaning behind the name Junction?
So a lot of work went into the name, but there was an old sort of pattern in climbing names. The climbing started in the early 90s, and there was probably like a wave of about 20 gyms that opened up in Ontario. And they had names like the first one was Joe Rockheads. There was Gravity in Hamilton. And then there was places like Climbers Rock in Burlington opened in 2009. Vertical Reality was one in Ottawa. Grand River Rocks opened a little bit later. But rock and vertical and mountain were always some feature of the name. And our kind of belief is that's not really what climbing is. Climbing, like, it does involve going up things, but the indoor climbing experience isn't about beating a thing or being extreme or being hardcore. It's really about this space where people come together. And so we were sort of tossing around names of like, what means like coming together? What means, this kind of community space we want? And the business is located, the property we found is at the connection point, the junction between the Canadian Pacific Railway line and the Canadian National Railway line. And there's like train tracks up the side of our property all day. And so we looked at that, we're like, oh, junction. We're at the junction. This is the junction of things coming together. We are where climbers come together. Because especially in London, with trains being such a defining source of why London's a city. Like, we're a big industrial city because we had trains connecting here 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so in London's history, that matters. And so all that came together in the name.
And so what kind of made you decide to bring it to life and actually take it into your own hands and open up your climbing gym?
Yeah, I had worked in the outdoor industry for years. I'd worked as an outdoor ed instructor in Hamilton area. I'd worked up north at summer camps. And the problem with a lot of outdoor work is it's really seasonal. That, you can work at the summer camp for the summer. And then you might get a job, lifeguarding through the winter, and maybe in the spring you can maybe work at a school during outdoor ed. And it's just, you kind of patch together all these jobs, and it's really seasonal. And you're, when you get rained on, or you're getting stuff canceled because of bad weather. And, I wanted a career that had some consistency and stability throughout the year. And had worked a couple places where I'd seen, like, for people who owned or started a business, I thought, that's what I want. It's very difficult in the economy that we're all in now to trust that a corporate or large corporation job you get will still be there in 10 or 20 years. That companies are changing all the time. They're making decisions that's best for themselves. So the best way to sort of control my fate and still have this outdoor world, but not get rained on, I put all that together. And at the intersection of that was rock climbing, which I kind of love doing. So I'm like, well, that's the thing to do. And climbing had really grown. This would be 2009 was when I started to plan doing it. And I'd seen in 10 years, climbing had kind of gone from being a fringe sport where you needed to be in a big city to support it, to being something that was making its way out into smaller cities. And London was really like one of the largest cities without a climbing gym at the time. So we sort of pointed our sights at London and thought this is the place to go. And myself and my business partner were really familiar with the city. I'd gone to high school here. He did business here with his other work. So we kind of, all that sort of went into, equation, and it's, opening a business is what came out.
And so, just like you were saying, was it difficult to find a location for this type of activity?
Oh, yes. Climbing needs a very specific shape. You need a building that's really tall, but isn't, like, you only need about around 10,000 square feet, which sounds like a lot, but for, an industrial building, it's actually not that big. And any building that's normally 30, 40, 50 feet tall is like 500,000 square feet. So to find something like our building, which is the total building is 20,000 square feet, took 2 years of looking. We put offers on 4 buildings before we got one to stick. We'd put an offer in, and then the person would say, no, we don't want you. Or we put an offer in, and then we'd find out the building wasn't structurally sound, or we put an offer in and they just never call us back. And we were like, sort of starting to feel defeated. But the nice thing in all that is the building we're in ended up was the best of the bunch. And it's a superb building for our purposes. And we love the neighborhood, and, it's centrally located, and it's, we looked at one building that was from the 30s and had like wood columns and nothing was engineered and it was all hand built. And we're like, the real estate agent was like, you can look at the height. I'm like, yeah, but it's kind of, everything's leaning. It's too, maybe not this one. So
Yeah.
so,
Well, like you said, it turned out great with the Andersons in the same kind of plaza, and then now Odyssey's moved there. It's turned out to be a really great spot.
Mhm.
So before we kind of get into talking really specifically about what is offered at Junction and all the amazing things that go on there, we wanted to kind of go over a little bit of kind of climbing basics. That
Okay.
if we're talking about it, people will kind of understand what we're saying.
Mhm.
So a lot of people kind of know the regular rock climbing, but with the belay, but like what other things? There's bouldering is different. Like what is
Yeah.
bouldering?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So in the world of climbing, just like in really anything, there's a bunch of variations. And people tend to think of mountain climbing, which in our sport we would call alpineering or alpine climbing, which is where you're kind of going up the big mountain and there's like, ice axes and, oxygen tanks. And that's really a really specialized thing that not a lot of people do and you can't do without going to, the Rockies or, Switzerland or something. Our style of climbing is, indoor climbing is really just the act of climbing up a vertical wall, and we put plastic holds in a pattern up the wall that you then have to figure out how to climb. And we have about 100 of these climbs. Half of them are in our what we call our routes area, and half of them are on our boulder. And a good analogy is I use a lot is bouldering is like going for a sprint. It's a short, intense burst of climbing, and a route is like going for a jog. It's longer, it's more paced out. And really, which one you like is like, do you prefer skiing or snowboarding? It's they're both kind of similar, but people often like one more. The appeal of bouldering is it's very immediate. You just need a pair of shoes. You get on the wall. You follow the pattern set using colored holds. So you follow the holds to the top, see if you can make all the moves, and then you jump down onto the pad. About the tallest one we have is around 15 feet. The route walls are around 32 feet, and the system that protects you because you get so high is called a belay. And a belay can be in a couple of styles. We have automatic belays, which are basically these fancy machines with a strap that hangs down. Strap goes up with you. When you let go, the strap lowers you safely through the magic of mechanics.
Cool.
The second option is what's called a top rope belay. And a top rope belay has an operator. The rope is pre-hung up top. Climbers are very straightforward. Like, we're not very smart, so we like really obvious names usually. So the rope hung up top is top rope belay. And that's kind of the thing people think of the most because you have the person on the ground holding the rope. And it's a really simple skill. Operating a top rope belay is something we teach to kids in our summer camp. It's pretty straightforward, and it's really the best gateway into the sport. And then the next style of belay is called lead belaying, and the style of climbing is called sport climbing. Because the idea in sport climbing is that you're sort of pursuing the highest pursuit of the sport, and the sport climbing, the difference is that you're taking the rope and you're bringing it up from the bottom with you as you would climb outside. So it's sort of that transition from indoor climbing to outdoor climbing is knowing how to lead belay and learning how to sport climb. And then from there you have quick draws which you clip on the wall, and then from there you have other stuff that's kind of beyond the indoor world, but it's really fun and I would talk about, but get really, really nerdy about rope and equipment.
So you feel like most people who come into the Junction, as they can progress here on the walls, do you feel like it translates well to, a real mountain, side or something like that?
Yes, it's really its own thing. It would be comparable to swimming in a pool versus swimming in Lake Huron.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to swim nonstop in a pool for 30 minutes. But if you go and try swim straight out into Lake Huron into the waves for 30 minutes, psychologically in your head, you know you might be able to do it, but it's a very different experience. And that's kind of the transition from going inside to outside. The sense of exposure is different. The effort to get out there is different because you're walking into the woods with backpacks and and what indoor climbing tends to do is give people the taste of they want more adventure, and you can be in the gym, find connections to people who can guide you outside. And that's, if you do want to go outside, finding someone to mentor you and show you that is really a critical skill. It's not really something you can really figure out from a book or a YouTube video. There is a lot of pressure on the crags around the province that, they're seeing a lot of people going out and not knowing the etiquette. And so for anyone who is considering going outside, really, really take the time to know the local culture, know where the parking is allowed and it's not, know where, have a plan for dealing with going outside and going to the bathroom. Don't climb in groups of 20 because that's too many people for these crags. Don't bring music. It should be a pretty respectful process of the crags we have. Ontario has a lot of beautiful spots for climbing, some amazing climbing, but the access to them is pretty tenuous at times. And we as climbers are responsible to make sure that when we go outside, we are being mindful of the permission we have to climb there. And we're not entitled to it, unfortunately.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm just a little side note. I've watched recently a few docs on, climbing Everest, recently, and how it's become such a tourist spot that, it's almost damaging. It is just damaging the actual mountain, and you'll find people in a line at the peak, waiting to just reach the peak. It's crazy. I'm just wondering if you've ever had any sort of experience like that yourself, where you're going to climb anywhere and it's a little bit too crazy almost with people.
Not directly from climbers. I think maybe the best analogy to that, there's this amazing place near that I've told the story, and my staff or other climbers have heard me say this. There's a crag near Milton called Rattlesnake Point. And Rattlesnake Point is it's a little park run by the Halton Conservation Authority. And it's this beautiful spot, beautiful view of farmlands rolling out to see Toronto skyline. There's this lovely little trail you can walk through the leaves in the fall. It's gorgeous. And it is one of the oldest crags in the province for climbing. Some of the earliest climbing in Ontario was done on this crag. But absolutely, it's slammed with people every weekend because it's 45 minutes from a major city in Toronto. The parking lot's 300 feet from the cliff edge. There's a staircase they built to make access safer right down the middle, so you can go half the climbs this way, half the climbs that way. The climbing's pretty easy compared to some places. And so, places like that just see such pressure. You don't see necessarily lineups of people, but you'll drive there and the parking lot's overflowing and there's 50 cars up the laneway because there's just so much pressure on some of these spaces. And, climbers to get the isolation, you have to put the extra effort into going farther north to places that are just harder to get to. Even at Rattlesnake Point, the main cliff has this staircase. You can hike 20 minutes up the trail. There's a second crag. It's way less traffic just because people don't want to walk that far. And in Ontario, the particular challenge we have is our main set of crags follow the line of the Niagara Escarpment that runs from Niagara Falls up to Tobermory. And that crag is shared with the Bruce Trail. And so on top of climbers trying to find their hobby, all the hikers, enthusiasts of, bird watchers and dog walkers, they're all using the same trails, the same parking lots and the same outhouses. And so, all these little groups have a responsibility in terms of how they manage their relationship with the outdoors. So.
Well, speaking of pressure, every time that I've seen, I've attended Anderson's a couple times myself. I personally am not a big rock climber, but whenever I am there, I do see you guys are kind of loaded in with people. Not even, I'm speaking pre-pandemic, of course, and everything, but I'm hoping you guys are doing, are able to do just fine there right now. Speaking of that, but The building has kind of expanded a lot. You were talking earlier about how many options there are available. Could you speak about expand a little bit on your expansion, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. So, sort of the construction story goes, we found the building in 2012. We applied for a rezoning without having a lease in place, hoping we would get it, which we did, which was lucky. And then we found what we thought was an investor to provide the rest of the money. They turned out to be, this is a whole other story that would involve much more time than this podcast has, but they actually stole a bunch of money and defrauded us, which is bad.
Oh my goodness.
We lost a whole year dealing with that.
Wow.
They went to jail, which is
Okay, that's good.
close to
Justice served.
but it was a setback. We were very fortunate. We were able to we'd started enough of the construction that we kind of had half the gym built. So we basically put up a wall down the middle of the building, finished the bathrooms with what little money we had left, and then opened a year late. And then, really we had about 7,000 square feet at that point. Really got great support from the community, really had a nice sort of scene happening. And kind of those early days were kind of cool because we were tucked at the back of our building. Our doorway was around the back at the time. And we used to have bonfires around the back, when the night was done. And it was kind of this sort of small little scene. And then in 2017, we were doing well enough that we could borrow enough money to kind of build an upstairs. We moved the boulder to an upstairs mezzanine, which was sort of the original vision, was to have that boulder in its own upstairs kind of space. And then we, built a nice lobby underneath that. So, when we have birthday parties arrive, there's enough room for 12 kids to arrive and not be in the way of the members. And then the 2018, we added another room that's what we call our program room. And that was a room for school groups and our classes and clubs and places to kind of give them a space that was not in with the main membership. So everyone kind of had their own space to do something. And then the next plan, we have one more piece of space that's going to become a training area. It needs a fire escape to be usable. It's too far from any existing fire escape. And then once we build that fire escape, we'll have a weight and workout area. And then the only thing remaining is to try and convince Anderson's to expand their tap line across through the wall so we can pour beer directly inside Junction. That'd be the final sort of touch. We did have to, when we opened up, we did add air conditioning, which was something that was quite expensive, but, has really helped us. We really wanted the gym to be sort of, this is kind of comes back to what I think your podcast is about. There's this attitude in London that things in London aren't always as good as the good version of that will be in Toronto. If it's nice in London, it'll be better in another city. And our vision was to build something in London that was as good as any gym is in the province and in the country, really. We'll put our walls and setting and terrain up against, climbing anywhere around, across Canada. And, really, I think that shows if you go in the spaces, how big it is, how bright it is. And, having the air conditioning, having, the quality of climbing setting that we have is something that we really put a lot of effort into. We don't want to cut corners just because we're outside the GTA.
You were talking a little bit earlier about you have various levels of lanes and routes, and you also climb on, it's like a 5-point something, you have a rating system. Could you tell us a little bit about that and kind of what would a beginner go and try and whatnot?
Yeah, so in climbing, there's, from outdoor climbing, the system was developed over the years called the Yosemite Decimal System. And it was basically, there were 10 climbs in Yosemite Valley, California, which is made famous by the Free Solo movies with Alex Honnold. And that was sort of you would compare the climb you were on to this certain climb in Yosemite and be it's about as hard as that one. So it's a 5.4. It's about as hard as this one. It's about a 5.8. And, that language got kept by gyms. They stopped at 5.10 at the time. And now people have climbed up to 5.15. Around 5.10, they started adding A, B, C, D, because it was a little bit harder than a 10, but not quite. It got really nuanced. Our gym, we just use 10 plus, 10 minus. It's just simpler. But if you go in the gym, basically 5.4 is our easiest. Why it doesn't start at 5.0 is sort of a legacy of the sense of hardness moves around. A 5.0 would basically be a ladder, which we don't really have. And then, you kind of go on it and you pick the climb and you climb. It's okay to fall off. Like people kind of wonder like, oh, I can't do that one. I keep falling off. And like, it's kind of the point. So most beginners, an average fit person could probably climb a 5.7 or 5.8 pretty comfortably. But really it's really, the only thing you're competing against is yourself. So if you're having a good time in the climb, enjoy that climb. The grading is there more as a guide. People will complain, oh, that climb's not a 5.10, it should be a 5.10 plus. And I'm like, okay, you can call it a 10 plus. They're guidelines, they're not rules. And even in our gym, our level 5.10, if you go to a gym in Toronto, you might find that's a 5.11 because their sense of hard is kind of different. And I compare it to going skiing. If you do a black diamond at Bowler here in town, and then you go to a black diamond at Banff and Whistler, they're very different.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Their sense of hard of skiing is very different. Yeah. So it's we try not to obsess too much on numbers. On our boulder, we use a color system that starts at pink and goes up to through yellow, red, or sorry, green, yellow, red, and so on up through the colors. And again, that was to remove an obsession with numbers and just make it focus on the quality. Are you having a good quality climb?
Right.
And we could set a climb with an easy start but a hard finish, not debate, is it is this they were called the V system. Is this a V4 or a V5? Well, no, it's a great climb, so it's a blue, and that's it. And if you do come to our gym, we tour you around and we show you. Any first-time climber gets a tour that explains the grades, gets us showing how to use the auto belay systems. I will say that right now, if you're listening to this during the pandemic times, everything needs to be booked, which is new. So you book a day pass, although it's not really a day pass anymore. You book a session, and our staff will get you set up with gear. The shoes make a huge difference. If you're climbing anywhere, climbing shoes are absolutely worth the few dollars you pay to rent them. And now we require them because they really do. You can usually climb a level or two harder once you have shoes on.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've been to Junction a couple times, and I did it both this was way back, like early days, and I did it both times without climbing shoes, and it was like so difficult. My friend just killed it compared to me. Like, what is going on? Like, we're about the same. It's just because she's like, oh, my toes can get around the boulders way better. I was like, okay.
Yeah, no, it works. And we we originally, like, our philosophy was always to be like, we want to be inclusive and we don't want to like prescribe what your climbing experience must be. We want people to find their own pathway into what the sport is. And so if someone didn't want to pay for shoes because maybe they don't have the extra few bucks, it's like, okay, use your running shoes. That can be fun. And now we're a little more like, I think there is benefit in time to be directive to say like, sometimes I'll say, if you've already rented a harness, it's $4 more for the shoes, and like you'll have $4 more fun if you rent the climbing shoes. They really do. They really do help.
I'm just wondering, are they like those shoes where your toes stick out? Is that what the difference is? Is that the kind of, or
that's those spread out your fingers, or sorry, spread out your toes. It concentrates your toes into like a PowerPoint, so everything is focused, and then they have a really soft rubber that bites the wall. It's like having a snow tire in the winter. It just, in the right conditions, it just performs.
Your analogies, your metaphors are just fantastic, I gotta say. Now, you mentioned earlier, about the 5-point system. Now, and how when everybody comes in, that they get shown around. But if I wanted to, there's lessons involved as well. If I wanted to get something like that, right?
Yeah. So the access to the gym right now comes in a couple of ways. Most people, and it really depends on your sort of gateway in. Like, right now, because of we're caps of due to COVID restrictions, we can have 50 people in the building. So the boulder right now is only for members because it's not huge and that space is pretty in demand. We want to make sure it's safe and there's room for people to be up there without feeling crowded. But if you were a boulderer, Most boulderers just like the independence of figuring it out themselves. So they'll come in with a friend, they'll experience the sort of physicality of the climbing, and then they're just like, I want to keep doing this. If you come in and your first experience is like, coming in and doing the auto belays, and you're like, oh, these auto belays are great, but I want to do more climbing, then usually you'll end up taking what's called the top rope belay lesson. That lesson comes with, more visits, either a membership or a few punch passes. And then you use those to come back and keep getting better. And then you can decide if you want to buy gear and commit to ropes climbing, or you can decide then if you want to get a 30-day membership or a 1-year membership, or we really don't. Climbers have what I call a very low bullshit tolerance. If that's, I don't know if that's allowed in your podcast, but you can bleep that. But
Absolutely.
if I tried to play games like, some fitness places are known for, where like, oh, well, this membership, you can only cancel with, meeting with this certain person on Friday, or you can only buy one kind of membership and it's got to be for a year. Like, we really don't think that serves the community well, that we want to recognize there's a bunch of different ways people do the sport. Some people do it 5 days a week. Some people do it once a month. Some people do it once and don't come back for a year. And, and so being aware of that, trying to be respectful of the different styles of enjoying leisure, enjoying the hobby is key to us, as opposed to saying, this is our way, you must take classes or you must do this. Most climbers want to figure it out themselves, but we do have classes on top rope belaying, lead belaying. We have what's called our fundamentals class, which is sort of a one-on-one workshop with one of our instructors. And truthfully, beyond that, the best thing you can do is just climb lots. Come in and get as much time on the wall.
You guys do competitions as well there, right? Or at least pre-pandemic and post, hopefully, as well, right?
Yeah, so we do competitions a couple of ways. We host local friendly competitions, bouldering competitions, that we call boulder nights. We put up usually around 35 problems. We strip the whole boulder, put up 35 new problems, and it's what's called a scramble format. You just climb, whatever, they're numbered 1 to 35. You climb as many as you can. You get points depending on how hard it is, how many tries it took you, and at the end of the night, you add up your score. We do those about 3 times a year. We used to do them a little more, but they got bigger. Now we do it. The one that's a big hit for us is we do it a glow in the dark version, where we like bring in glow lights and a DJ, and it's just like a dance club. It's amazing. We do host competitions. A couple years ago, we hosted the Ontario Youth Climbing Provincial Championship, which was pretty cool. We've hosted a couple. So there's something called the Ontario Climbing Federation that organizes competitive climbing, and that's pretty serious. And there's judges and volunteers and officiality. And we've just started a rope climbing series that got shut down by the pandemic, but that was our first attempt at doing a rope climbing thing for our members.
You've had you were talking about like special events, like glow in the dark. There's ladies' nights. There's movie nights. What's a favorite movie that you've been able to host there, by the way?
Well, the movies we do. So every year there's a movie series released called Real Rock, and Real Rock is a collection of climbing films that get put together, and you can bring them into your gym, and it's sort of just a big community event. And people like Alex Honnold, who's famous for Free Solo, and Tommy Caldwell, who's famous for the Dawn Wall, but a bunch of other amazing climbers. These films get made that just are so incredible to look at. And can be about climbing in the Arctic, or can be about climbing in Jordan, or the Middle East, and places that are really kind of on the edge of the sport. And so we bring in this movie every year. We were hosting it on campus, but now we bring it to the Highland, or we did bring it to the Highland. On Warncliffe there, and it's just a huge night just to get people pumped about the sport and sort of where the exciting things are happening.
It's like you always see in the like sort of classic skateboard communities, where they've made a video and they're showing it in the local shop, sort of thing. The community gets together and sees it. It's that sort of thing, right?
Exactly like that. Yeah.
Nice. What kind of advice would you give to someone that's wants to start climbing? They've listened to this podcast. They think Junction sounds so cool, but they're too nervous. Like, it's like, okay, they have the option of straight up falling. Like that could be
You know, there is a high, like, I think that some of this has gone away, but there's still an old perception that this sport's pretty dangerous. And the reality is we work pretty hard to make it really safe. And I used to work in the camp industry. And if you ever get like an insurance form for your camp, you check off all the activities your camp has, and then they give you your insurance. And like, if you had climbing checked off, it didn't really change your insurance. But if you had like horseback riding checked off, then it was like through the roof, because horses are way more dangerous, the systems we have in place are really proven. And the other thing I say to people though is like, being afraid of heights is like biologically useful. It has kept our species from doing things that are dangerous. It keeps us out of trouble. So if you're afraid of heights and you want to get over that fear, climbing is a great way to do it. You can do it in a safe, controlled way. You can find a way up that matches your level of skill. If you don't like being on the boulder because you don't like not having a rope, do the rope climb. If you don't like going up really high, do the bouldering. There should be a way in for you. Get the shoes. That helps make you feel safer. Don't shortcut on that piece of equipment. But if you just think, oh, this isn't for me, that's cool too. Like I don't think this sport needs to be for everyone. But if you're ready to take the plunge, you will find a way to do it that should match where you're at.
Is there anything else that you would like listeners to know about Junction before we get into our London-based questions?
I think if you haven't been down to our space, it's a little tricky right now with the pandemic on. We're a little more limited, but absolutely once we're done, like once this is kind of done, like it's absolutely a place that you should feel like you can come and try and be prepared for your hands to hurt. Be prepared for it to be hard. I would not say it's an easy sport. It is something that can be more intuitive than other things. I think the learning curve is very different than something like skateboarding, where it's, really, really hard at the start. I think the one thing I need to make sure my manager would tell me to say is there's a waiver that you do need to fill out, and it will save you time at the desk if you fill it out before you because that's the worst part, is someone comes to the desk all keen to climb and we're like, but did you do your paperwork? We need to keep our insurance company happy by having that waiver. So there's that.
Insurance is important. We're not dealing with anybody not falling at this place. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've never had to use it. So
exactly.
We'll keep doing our job well.
All right. So let's get into some London specific questions.
Awesome.
We're into it. All right. So what would you say is your favorite restaurant or your favorite place to eat in the city?
The answer I should give, and is easy to give because it's super amazing, is the E10 at Anderson's beside us. They're fantastic. However, if I'm looking for a special occasion, Craft Pharmacy is fantastic. And they're on Warncliffe. They do a superb job. And I would answer their spot.
We are the city of neighborhoods here in London. We're known for that. Do you have a specific favorite neighborhood in the city?
When we moved here, we chose to live in Orchard Park, Sherwood Forest area, because I think that is sort of very classic London with lots of trees, and it accesses the valley. You can get right into the Medway Creek there. And that is like, through the pandemic, that was like our oasis. That was the place we could go to get out of the house and be in the woods, but still kind of be alone. So I'm gonna go with my hood.
That's a new one, so that's a good one. What would you say is like a hidden gem in the city that people might not know about?
So I don't like making lunch, which is bad. So I've explored most restaurants at least in the East Village neighborhood. I think there's this delightful place called So Inviting, which is a little, like, the nicest woman ever makes these like Chinese style pot sticker dumpling things, and you like serve them out by the weight, and then you weigh them on a little scale, and she charges you whatever you buy. It's fantastic, and she deserves every bit of attention and success she gets. In a similar fashion, Momo's at the market. She does Nepalese food. They're fantastic, and they had a restaurant inside what was East Village Grocer, and I think they're still there as well. So his place, and if you're looking for a podcast guest, he would be excellent. He's a super interesting guy. So both those places deserve lots of love. And then I think one more I go to, and I think is missed out, is a place called Nova Era Bakery on Florence and Egerton.
Yeah.
And Egerton.
It's
And
full
they
of orange.
that's super good sandwiches, but they make these Portuguese custard tarts that will like make your brain melt. They're so, so
That does sound really good.
all of them deserve love. And actually, sorry, I need one more. In a non-food related way, the place that people don't know about being amazing is the chapel at Windermere on the Mount, which is, my kid had a music recital, and this is where they hosted it for some reason, and it is just this gorgeous old church. And I think you're allowed to go in there if you're just like it's sort of, now it's like a part of a retirement home thing.
Mhm.
I don't really know how you get in there, but it's all these mosaics, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and the kind of place that you don't really ever go. So it's really hidden, and how you get in there without visiting someone in the facility, I don't know.
It's funny you mentioned that, Aaron and
I'm
I.
gonna put the challenge to you guys to go find it and make it part of your podcast and see if I back me up if I'm right. It's really, really cool.
No, I was going to say we've been there. We used to be choir kids when we were young. So
There you
we've sung there, you know, and
Am I wrong?
Yeah.
It's really nice. Yeah.
it's really nice. It's absolutely amazing in there. Yeah.
I mean, you have to appreciate Catholic, like the beauty of mosaics, and it's a lot of Catholic iconography, which is not for everyone, but it is unlike any other church I have been in.
Yeah. I would say that it's maybe not now open as much because
Probably
of the retirement, but if it is like a church, it's usually open to the public. So at any time, go check that out.
Now, if you were to have a perfect London day or evening, what would it entail?
What season? Winter or summer?
Oh, that's a good
Let's
question.
Let's go winter, because this will come in the winter,
Yes, let's do it.
leading into the winter.
So winter would winter would start with skating at Covent Garden,
Nice.
which you got to kind of make that a thing. And then probably wandering up Dundas to stop at Heroes and having some sort of leisure shopping moment there. Probably lunch over here at E10. Oh, where would I do breakfast? That's a good question. Am I on my own? There's so many factors in this I need to judge. Is it just me?
It's your perfect day, so we don't want to judge that question.
My wife then, and we're gonna definitely go skating, and the kids are being looked after by people who are not me. They can hang out with their grandparents for this, and then we'll hit up the Early Bird Cafe for breakfast. She probably won't go to the comic store. Oh no, she's pretty cool. She'd definitely be down with that. But we'd wander through Covent Garden Market. We'd buy some chocolate from the chocolate place. Lunch, we'd head over to Craft Pharmacy. And then if the lights are up at Victoria Park, we'd wander back through Victoria Park and the lights. And then probably, it would end with a concert at the London Music Club, because that's the best place. Because I don't ever know anyone who's playing there, but whenever someone is, it's always amazing.
Yeah. Pete Denemy knows how to pack that place for sure.
Mhm.
Pete Denemy, we should get him on, Aaron. That's a good one. Now, we are going to get into our signature segment here in the show. It's called This
Or
That. Okay, cool. So for this segment, we are going to ask that you keep your choice we're going to give you like a choice of either or, basically, this or that. And you're just going to give us your answer, and we're going to quick fire and move on to the next one, okay? You got it. So it's as little thought as you can. Just like first answer that comes to your head, okay?
All right.
All right, so Western Fair Market or Covent Garden Market?
Western Fair.
Masonville Mall or White Oaks Mall?
Sherwood Forest Mall would be the actual answer. But I go with Masonville out of nostalgia for the old golf course of my childhood.
We should have said Sherwood. That's a good point on us there. Sunfest or Home County?
Sunfest, but it's close.
Uh,
It's so close.
Victoria Park or Springbank Park?
Springbank Park, for sure.
Prince Al's or Stobie's?
I'm gonna go Soprano. I keep deviating off your choices. We buy all our pizza. One of the best jobs I had opening the Junction was to eat pizza at all the places in the village, and pick the place that would provide pizza for our birthday parties. And Soprano's Pizza is pretty much all I eat, and it's superb, and it's great, and it's cheap, and I can't see why I wouldn't eat there. So we buy like hundreds of pizzas a year from them.
They thank you so much, I'm sure.
I'm sure they do.
And the last one, Beer Lab or Forked River?
I will go Forked River on that one because when I was starting Junction, the guys from Forked River the year before won the city's new business contest. And then we were like a nominee the next year. So we met each other and they were like kind of keen on us. And at the time they were the only microbrew place in the city. And I drank a lot of beer in those early days. Now I kind of have to answer Anderson's because they're, and then the guys at London Brewing have been really nice to us as well. So I kind of feel like nothing against either of those choices, but like there's like a prayer, like I gotta.
Yeah.
I wonder what you could do there. Yeah, like you have to go Anderson's or LBC. You almost can't answer that question.
Yeah, I think I can go Anderson's just out of like sheer proximity. They're gonna be my first choice with a geographic advantage.
As you say, they could walk over there and be like, I heard what you said.
Yeah. I will also give props to Powerhouse for her right now having the best patio in the city.
I 100% agree with that. They're killing it there.
And I will give props to, and at Beer Lab, I don't get downtown enough, so I will have to go down and try their beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always different, always changing, because it's such a small space, so it's really cool.
Yeah. I will make that my new priority.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, John. We really appreciate it. Like some final words for the listeners. Anything knowledge you'd like to give them at all?
I think you know what I think what I would say is I appreciate what you guys are trying to do. Like there is, I think the one comment I did get when I started. I said I was going to London. It was there. People would say like, "Oh, London, isn't that a conservative town?" They're like, "Are they really going to adopt this climbing thing?" And I always thought that was a terrible reputation that we didn't deserve as a city because, I think London's biggest challenge is it's a really easy place to live. And not in the last year, but there was a time when housing was pretty cheap and you could find a job in a factory and kind of live pretty easily. And so what you had to do is give people a compelling reason to come out of their really comfy house because, it's a big city, it's kind of sprawls. And so, there are a lot of places out there in the city that are giving people these compelling reasons. And there's a lot of great stuff. I mentioned Heroes Comic Books. It's one of the best comic books stores in the country. The restaurants like not just Craft Pharmacy, but like Root Cellar. Like there's people doing really Hunter & Co., really original, cool food things. And so I think that attitude's a bit dated. I think there's absolutely things in the city that are pretty cool and worth exploring. So thank you, and I hope people get out there.
Thank you, John. We really appreciate it.
Have an awesome day.
If you don't mind, before you go, we always ask our guests to just say real quick their name, where they're from, and that they're listening to the London's Pretty Cool podcast.
Sure. This is John Kudelka from the Junction Climbing Center, and you're listening to London's Pretty Cool podcast.